Hey y'all, it's Jonathan and I am back with another video, and it's been a minute. I'm kind of getting used to the summer and being on the summer vacation, and so I've been taking my time. There is going to be plenty of content coming in the coming weeks, especially over my Patreon, patreon.com/beblackbeloved. So if you want to give me a little bit of extra support, go over there, subscribe to my Baldwin tier, and get access to that exclusive content. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here to talk about what I read during the month of May. I know I'm a little bit late, but we are here. And so I actually had an amazing reading month. I read 8 books during the month of May, and I'm super excited to talk about all of them. So if you're interested in seeing what I read during the month of May, keep on watching and let's get right into this video. So the first book that I read during the month of May was The Piano Lesson by August Wilson. And this was the April read for the Black in Love Book Club, and I finished it the day of our meeting, which is actually May 1st, so I counted it during this month. And so The Piano Lesson is this really powerful read that sort of reminds me of just why I love August Wilson so much. My first exposure to August Wilson was with Fences, of course, one of his most well-known pieces. And then I followed that up reading Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which was turned into a film produced by Denzel Washington. And The Piano Lesson is actually next up to be produced as a film, to be adapted as a film. And so I thought that also, since April was actually August Wilson's birthday month, that it would be very timely and appropriate for us to read an August Wilson piece. And so we read The Piano Lesson. The Piano Lesson is set in Bernice Charles's Pittsburgh home, and one night her brother and his friend show up with a truck full of watermelon and some really iffy intentions on why they are back in town. And so they arrive at Bernice Charles's house, cause a ruckus, try to wake everybody up. We soon find out that Boy Willie's real intention is to get Bernice to sell this ornately carved piano that sits in the middle of her living room. And this piano has a long family history, and you learn what that is. And you really see these two siblings with drastically different ideas of what Black life should look like, what Black success looks like, what they want their own lives to really look like, how they see themselves existing as Black people in this society. And so I just thought that it was absolutely amazing. I love Bernice's character. I think that one of the things about August Wilson's plays is the Black women are always such captivating characters, and I think that August Wilson does a really great job writing Bernice, but I want to see even more. I think that there is a level of restraint that exists in Bernice's character, in how Bernice's character was written, where you don't get her full story, and I would love to read more about her. And I know, of course, that's not going to happen, but it left me with a ton of questions about her as a character. So I think that The Piano Lesson is definitely worth the read, and it was a 10 out of 10 for me, along with a lot of the other members of the book club. So I would highly encourage you, if you haven't read anything by August Wilson, this will be a really good starting point. Also, of course, Fences would be really great plays to read. And so I definitely want to go through all of the Pittsburgh cycle, but 3 at this point, I think that I've gotten a good start. So yeah. After I read The Piano Lesson, I kind of tiptoed my way into another romance, and I wound up reading Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell by Taj McCoy. And interesting thing is, I knew that this book looked and sounded familiar when I picked it up. Little did I know that there was a tad bit of controversy attached to this book, but I later found out once I checked the Goodreads reviews. I was reminded of exactly what had happened. Let me know in the comments how you sort of feel, if you have read it, and based on kind of what I say. So, a delicious debut rom-com about a plus-size sweetheart who gets a full life makeover after a brutal breakup. Savvy Sheldon spends a lot of time tiptoeing around the cracks in her life. Her high stress and low thanks job, her clueless boyfriend, and the falling apart kitchen she inherited from her beloved grandma, who taught her how to cook and how to love people by feeding them. But when Savvy's world starts to crash down around her, she knows it's time for some renovations. Starting from the outside in, Savvy tackles her crumbling kitchen, her relationship with her body, her work-life balance or lack thereof, and last but not least, her love life. The only thing that doesn't seem to require effort is her ride-or-die squad of friends, but as any home Reno show junkie can tell you, something always falls apart during renovations. First, Savvy passes out during hot yoga, then it turns out that the contractor she hires is the same sexy stranger she unintentionally offended by judging based off of appearances. Worst of all, Savvy can't seem to go anywhere without tripping over her ex and his latest upgrade. Savvy begins to realize that maybe she should have started her renovations the other way around, beginning with how she sees herself before building a love that lasts. And so I think that if people read the synopsis of this book, you can already kind of see that going into it, I will say some of the critiques kind of are answered in that synopsis. But of course, that is for the people that really feel strongly to kind of, answer for themselves when they read the book. And so essentially, a lot of the criticism was that the book's premise and a lot of the plot was fatphobic. And I'm not in the place to say what is and is not fatphobic. When I read the actual Goodreads comments, a lot of people wound up saying that it wound up not even really bothering them as much as they thought it would. But the particular thing about this book is, so Savvy, her boyfriend breaks up with her, essentially saying that she has stopped taking care of herself and that she's really let herself go. And so Savvy goes on this mission to eat clean and start working out and a variety of different things to sort of improve, quote unquote, improve her appearance, and make herself more comfortable in the body that she exists in. And so I think that once you read this book, you kind of see that the message is essentially more that, her trying to get this revenge body was pointless, because it's more about her actually taking care of herself and practicing self-care and taking time to, do the things she loves, cook the food that she loves, hang out with her friends, actually build relationships with other people, rather than kind of always thinking about this job and always thinking about this boyfriend and taking care of him and all these different things. So the revenge body winds up not being the solution to Savvy's problems. And so I think that maybe some people were a bit harsh in their critiques of this book. At least that's how I feel personally, because I think that reading this book, you kind of get a lesson that almost is saying that, you should not worry about how other people view your body. Savvy is beautiful. Savvy is not in the gym working out to be skinny. She really is just on this mission to just care about herself a little bit more. And so I actually thoroughly enjoyed this as a romance novel. I thought that what I actually enjoy about a lot of romance novels more so than the romance is actually seeing characters live their lives and navigate the various relationships, interpersonal relationships within their lives, seeing them spend time with their friends, seeing them, cook. The food sounded so good in this book, and y'all know I love food descriptions in books. And so I actually really enjoyed following along with Savvy as a character. Now, the one thing that actually did bother me and kind of bored me about certain aspects of this book is these very long, extensive scenes where they're playing tennis. I found them to be extremely boring, and I don't think that they really added much to the actual story. So I think the author really could have cut the book down by 100 pages if they had just cut out those scenes. But I was reading this book when I was actually on a plane. I started it on a plane ride. And so I always love a good romance. At this point, I think that every romance I've read when I have taken a flight, I've enjoyed. So I'm glad that I picked up this book and I wound up kind of just going ahead and finishing it. Rather than immediately when I heard that there was just this drama surrounding the novel, that like, you know, completely like tossing it away. I am interested in seeing what other people have to say about Savvy Sheldon. Feels good as hell. So let me know what you think. If you have read the book, if you plan on picking up the book, if you remember all of the Twitter booktube drama surrounding this book, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. After I finished that romance, I feel like this is a really appropriate book to talk about next. I actually finished The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks. And this was a really phenomenal read for me. It took me a while to read it. So I actually started this book in December, and I had planned on finishing it by the end of the year. I told myself that I needed to read The Will to Change because I had read Bell Hooks, a good chunk of this actual series that she has written. I read All About Love, and I read Salvation, Black People in Love, and I've read portions of some of the, I have Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem. So I was really interested in finally reading this one because it actually is specifically targeted at talking to men about patriarchy, masculinity, and relationships and love. So I was like, I need to read The Will to Change. And so I had started it, and I actually had to put it down for a while because I felt like Bell Hooks was really slapping me in the face just within the first couple of pages, you know, when she was just really hitting hard and digging deep on how we feel, men's relationship to patriarchy. And it really caused me to kind of have to sit with myself for a while and come to terms with a lot of things that I think after reading a portion just within like the first 30 pages of this book, I wound up calling one of my closest friends, and I just had to vent a little while to him to kind of just talk about what I had read. And I was sending screenshots to him and all of these different things. And so I really think that The Will to Change does a phenomenal job of talking about all the ways in which patriarchy harms men. You know, it doesn't allow men to be their full, complete selves. It tells you to be unemotional. It tells you to be violent. And I think that that's one of those things that is very difficult to sort of reckon with as a man, you know, whether you're straight, gay. I think that what Bell Hooks does an amazing job of, which was actually one of my critiques of All About Love, and I think she does it a little bit better in Salvation, is really addressing queer men's relationship with patriarchy, and that you can see the way that patriarchy affects a lot of the conversations and a lot of the relationships that queer men have with each other, with women, within relationships, romantic relationships, all of those different things. And so she tackles a lot of that in The Will to Change. I think that it's one of those books where it will cause you to reflect. It will cause you to think about a lot. And I think that it's one of those books where you're going to feel like you disagree with some of those things. You're going to want to push back against some of the things that Bell Hooks is saying. But I think that that's the great thing about Bell Hooks' work, is that she causes you to think. She says a lot of things that some people may disagree with, but there's never a time where you're just like, where after you sit there and you think about it for a while, where you're like, she's completely wrong, you know, like she's gone like completely left. Like there's validity to a lot of her critiques of culture, of relationships, all of the different things that happen within our society. So, you know, it was a book that took some time to get through. And I think that that is the sign of a really good, you know, quote unquote self-help book. I'm not a huge self-help fan, but you know, when it comes to things that are in the self-help, sociology realm of things, I always enjoy reading those. So I would highly encourage all men to pick up The Will to Change. You need to buy a copy for your friends. Talk about it. Buy your barber a copy because they probably need it. So I'm just going to put a picture of this next book because I'm not going to talk about it. I talked about it over on my Patreon because I really felt like it was one of those conversations that I needed to have just with my subscribers on Patreon. And I might wind up doing like a live, because I think that it's one of those things where I don't want to put a discussion of this book up on YouTube to kind of just have people watching it with no real context, without being able to ask questions back. So definitely on my Patreon, I've talked about this book. I wrote a full review on Goodreads if you want more details in terms of my criticisms of this book. But I feel like I've done enough to tank the Goodreads rating on this book over here. So we're just going to move on. Next book that I read, I switched over to the YA genre, and that is actually Under and Santi Were Here by Johnny Garza Villa. And Ander and Santi is an incredibly beautiful novel about a non-binary artist named Ander and Santi, an undocumented immigrant. And so this was such a great YA read. I listened to it on audio, and it's beautifully narrated. And I did a full review over on my channel, so definitely go check out that video if you want to hear more about Ander and Santi Were Here. After that, I hopped back into romances, and I actually bought this on Kindle.
Don't kill me.
I had read a couple of other books by Jayce Ellis. A while back, I read Learned Reactions, and then I think there was like a sequel to it. But I really enjoyed Jayce Ellis's work. She is a Black woman, a queer Black woman that writes queer Black romances. And so I was like, let me pick up another one of Jay Ellis's works. And so I actually downloaded this on Kindle, and I flew through it. And it's called Reverence, A Second Chance Gay Romance, the Devotion Series, Book 1. And I really love this romance. It was quick, it was intense, it was sexy, it was beautiful. I think that one of the things that I actually loved about this had nothing to do with the actual romance, but it actually discussed the challenges of being a queer Black man within the educational sphere. I'll read the synopsis of it, and then we'll get into the details. So Rashid knew moving back to his small hometown in Virginia wouldn't be smooth sailing, especially since he refused to so much as visit for 25 years. But he isn't prepared for the level of vitriol he gets from the person he's most anxious to see, his high school sweetheart, Percy, his best friend, his closest confidant, and the reason he's returned. Once upon a time, Rashid chose his reputation over their relationship, and now Percy makes it clear that he isn't the least bit interested in renewing their friendship, let alone anything more. Rashid's determined to show Percy he's a changed man and won't make the same mistakes twice. But Percy's changed too, and as Rashid learns more about him and what it means to be out and proud in this town, he questions if he's as ready as he thought. Percy's worth it though, and after breaking his heart the first time, Rashid's on a mission to prove himself worthy of a second chance. And so, especially when it comes to Percy as a character, I think that when you're reading about the troubles of being a queer educational leader, it's something that really resonated with me, and I think that it will resonate with a lot of us. Because, with as much quote-unquote progress as people say this country has made, there are very pointed attacks at the LGBTQ plus community, especially within education, when you have things like the Don't Say Gay bills, and you have people that are actively trying to remove books with queer and trans representation from libraries within schools, from public libraries. Is absolutely wild, thinking about how this whole country is just going down the toilet, and conservative politicians are really actively attacking the LGBTQ plus community and LGBTQ plus authors, especially Black queer authors, people like George M. Johnson. Their books being some of the most banned books across the board. You look at these lists, and it's wild to think about. And so I really think that Jayce Ellis really hit home with that one. But overall, I just thoroughly enjoyed this romance. I thought that it was a very quick read, and it was just something that you could really dive into just one late night, pour a glass of wine and just chill out and read a good romance. So I would highly recommend reading Reverence, A Second Chance Gay Romance. Pick it up on Kindle. Hopefully Jayce Ellis will release physical copies of this book, because I would love to have a physical copy of some of her work. So I'm gonna look around for that and see if I can get it. But yeah, Reverence was a 10 out of 10 for me. After that, I read Homebodies by Tembe, Denton-Hurst, and this was another phenomenal read that I also have done a full review of over on my channel. So if you are interested in hearing more about that book, hop over to my channel and watch that review. I absolutely love that book, and I think that Homebodies will probably go down as it'll be top 2 books of the year. So I would highly recommend reading Homebodies. It's worth the read. And then the last book that I read this month was I think that this is a kind of booktube darling author, if I really can say that. And this is my first time reading any of R.F. Kuang's work. But she has all y'all in a tizzy, cause the Poppy War, Babel, it had y'all just going wild over on BookTok, on Bookstagram, on Book Twitter, on BookTube, all of the book platforms. And so I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. And let me just start out. There's one quote from this book that got me. Racial trauma sells, right? To me, Yellowface was just a really great commentary on everything that has been going on recently. All of the book Twitter conversations and controversy is in this book. So authors June Hayward and Athena Liu were supposed to be twin rising stars. Same year at Yale, same debut year in publishing, but Athena's a cross-genre literary darling, and June didn't even get a paperback release. Nobody wants stories about basic white girls, June thinks. So when June witnesses Athena's death in a freak accident, she acts on impulse. She steals Athena's just-finished masterpiece, an experimental novel about the unsung contributions of Chinese laborers to the British and French war efforts during World War I. So what if June edits Athena's novel and sends it to her agent as her own work? So what if she lets her new publisher rebrand her as Juniper Song, complete with an ambiguously ethnic author photo? Doesn't this piece of history deserve to be told, whoever the teller? That's what June claims, and the New York Times bestsellers list seems to agree. But June can't get away from Athena's shadow, and emerging evidence threatens to bring June's stolen success down around her. As June races to protect her secret, she discovers exactly how far she will go to keep what she thinks she deserves. With its totally immersive first-person voice, Yellowface takes on questions of diversity, racism, and cultural appropriation, not only in the publishing industry, but the persistent erasure of Asian American voices and history by Western white society. R.F. Kuang's novel is timely, razor-sharp, and eminently readable. So I think that that's the word that you will see everybody using in their reviews. This book was so readable. I don't think I've read a character whose voice is so on the nose ever. Juniper is the quintessential liberal white Karen. She's Yale degreed, green-eyed, white woman who secretly hates the success of people of color as a result of the diversity trends in publishing. So I knew that this book was going to be wild when I read the first 13 pages, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to put this down. You get a character who witnesses her friend die right in front of her, and she is frantic, and she sees her manuscript and steals it before the ambulance can get there. And so one of the things about this book is our main character being so on the nose. She sees no wrong in anything that she's doing, constantly finding excuses for her actions. She's snooty, she's disrespectful, she plays the victim when necessary. She is the perfect unreliable narrator, backtracking, always adding on to her story, and she's delusional enough to make it work. And really, there are surprises at every turn on this novel. I think that Yellowface is really an almost flawless critique. The publishing industry diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, social media, and quote unquote cancel culture. And so I really, really love this book. I think that with it being so readable, you fall into the story and you don't want to come back up for air. And so I think that this being my first exposure to R.F. Kuang's work, it felt really, really worth waiting and not reading like any of her other stuff and just waiting around to read this book. Because now I'm excited to actually dive into her other work. And so what I will say, my only real critique of this book is that I did feel like it went on a little bit too long. And so really for the first like 16 chapters, I was gagging. Like, I was like, this is amazing. And then because the story was very fast paced, it was witty, it was dramatic, but then I got a bit tired. There were points where the story could have ended perfectly, but she decided to continue going on with the story. Like there would be kind of like the perfect, like almost cliffhanger, maybe. And I felt like she had gotten her point across, but then it would keep going on. So really by chapter 24, I was more than ready for the story to end. I feel like we do get a solid conclusion, but could the conclusion actually have been better? Could it have ended earlier? Absolutely. And so when you really start off a book on such a high note, it's kind of disappointing when you get to that ending and it doesn't feel as satisfying. But overall, I gave this book 5 stars. I would give it like a solid like 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like that only thing with it going on too long is kind of what took it down a little bit for me. But overall, this was a great first exposure to R.F. Kuang's work. So I'm super excited to read more. And have you picked up Yellowface? I need to know. I've watched a couple of reviews. I know I watched Monty's review of the video as soon as I finished it. I had been waiting to actually watch his review of this book until I actually finished it. So that was actually very satisfying. And yeah, it was a great way to end the month of May. And now I'm powering through the month of June, reading some great stuff. And I'm excited to tell you more about what I read during this month. So that is what I read during the month of May. Y'all, I got a jet. I have to head over to the bookstore to work. But let me know what you've been reading. Let me know if you've read any of these books. What were your thoughts? Do you plan on adding any of these to your TBR? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you haven't, subscribe to my Patreon for exclusive content. And I will catch y'all in the next one. And always remember that you are loved.